Hey everybody, welcome to the DBS Films Podcast. My name is Kellen. With me as always is my brother Brendan. Together we make movies with DBS Films. In today's episode, we are celebrating the fact that this week our 11th feature film, The Forest of Death, will be out on Amazon and other platforms for you guys to watch. And we're really excited about it. So we really just kind of wanted to take the next two episodes to just dive into what the Forest of Death means for us on kind of a grand scheme. One last look at it before we ship it off to the masses. And then, honestly, for the rest of this month, it is going to be very Forest of Death centric. We are going to be doing a scene by scene breakdown once the movie is out, just so we don't spoil anything. But really, in these next two episodes, we just wanted to kind of mention what it means to us, our thoughts on it, hopefully how it does, and just a few other things like that. So as always, be sure to go ahead and take a look at our Discord channel online, because that is the place to be. We make movies for our fans with our fans. So if you've ever wanted to be in the movie making process on set with us, all you got to do, download Discord, click the link in our many bios, and you will be good to go. So, this episode, I really almost want to see how does it fit in the grand scheme of DBS. We have a lot of movies now. We have different milestones that we check off. I would say The Hateful Eight is definitely the solid first period. And I think we're really kind of going into an end of a new period potentially. And that could be the Cinematic 3. I don't know what we're going to call it yet. We'll probably come up with a better name. But after Forest of Death, we did make a hard pivot back into found footage. So I almost kind of see these three movies, Girl in Cabin 13, The Haunted of the Murder House, and now The Forest of Death, being their own little section. And I mean, again, these are the three movies that came just on the precipice of us developing the model of making movies for our fans with our fans. So after this movie, we really start including a lot more members in our casting process. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to claim that these three are another era of DBS. How do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that the first 8 were just learning. We were just trying to figure out what to do. We were refining the model. We worked with a lot of people. We tried to figure out what worked, what didn't work. So we took a little bit of break. We came back, and Girl in Cabin 13 was #1 on Tubi, and that was a big time milestone because the first 8 movies, everything that we were doing, we were kind of on shaky ground. Everything was kind of falling apart. Amazon was cutting rates. Getting visibility was very difficult. It just wasn't like a solid business platform. I felt really comfortable in our production, but then getting the visibility after production was very difficult for us. With Girl in Cabin 13, we were able to make a jump with production quality, and that allowed more avenues of visibility because we were working with distribution companies for the first time. And you never know what's going to happen in distribution, but Girl in Cabin 13 came out there and it did phenomenally. Instantly, within I think the first month, it was our best-selling by far movie. Did a lot of work. We're still getting very nice royalty checks. And for the small budget that we made that movie, it became very lucrative, and it gave me confidence to scale up, saying, look, I could do this. It's possible to make movies with under 10 people. You can do it. Is it difficult? Yes, but it's definitely possible. So it kind of cemented the indie mindset, the idea that, we can, write, shoot, direct, and edit these things and make them good enough that, big distribution companies will take a look at them and, put them out there on all these platforms. So just having the confidence, knowing that if we make a quality product, we can get the visibility, change the game. And then we made Murder House, and you never know if Girl in Cabin 13 was just luck. It could have been just complete luck. You never know what's going to happen. But with Murder House, it did even better. And we really kind of cemented that foundation. Murder House was the first one that actually engaged our community, because Girl in Cabin 13 was the one that kind of found the community through TikTok, and just, people were watching that movie. Murder House was the first one where we had kind of like an anticipation up into the launch, which I think helped it out a lot. And now we're in Shapeshifter, which I think is a much better looking movie. And we have a full Discord, behind this movie. So I do think that all three of these movies are in their own little tranche, but I do think that there's quite a bit of separation between all three of them. I think you have Girl in Cabin 13 was very bare bones. Murder House was a higher production. It had more things going on, had more gore, more effects. And I think Shapeshifter was just an overall better production as far as lighting, as far as sound, as far as cinematics goes. So I think we took a big jump on each one of these three movies, but I do consider them all in their tranche, because the one after that, Into the Forest, I personally believe is a really big jump and takes us to the next level.
That is definitely my mindset as well too. I really think you can kind of see very similarities with them. And I will say, I just talking it out, I kind of came up with the idea that this is the new era. And then we have our found footage era coming up, which is, the next level that you're talking about. So glad we solidified that right now on the live podcast. But I think one of the things that you notice from these three is, the big one is, honestly, this is the solidify of the model of DBS. We didn't have making movies for our fans with our fans really until the start of the filming for Forest of Death, which was in late April, early May of last year. So we started to realize that process was there, and we did do some very bare bones casting for it. And we had our first in-person role. So we were kind of just developing that. But I really think the importance of those three is the development of our process as a production team. As you mentioned, this was the first time that it was basically us doing all of the production processes for the Hateful Eight. We had a team that we kind of worked with in one fashion or the other. As we progressed from 1 to 8, we started doing more and more things ourselves. And really, Girl in Cabin 13, in my opinion, was super safe and super, like very bare bones, as you mentioned, because we were worried that we will completely screw everything up. This is exactly the way that it happens, in the sense where, you think you'll be good, and next thing you know, we can't film it ourselves. It's even worse than it was before. Like, all of these things we would find out. So there's a lot of unknown in Girl in Cabin 13. I think after Girl in Cabin 13, we got a lot of confidence, and we said, you know what, we're feeling good, but we still want to take it a little bit safe. And what do? We revisited a concept that we knew was really good, which was the Haunting of the Suicide House, revisited again as Murder House. And then that leads us to number 3, which I am still, of all the ones that I thought we could screw up and have major issues with, man, it was this one with Forest of Death, by far. It's a very big concept, very ambitious. Honestly, I think the only thing it had going for it was the fact that we were having cast and crew that we used before, and that we had more experience. But this was just a big project for us to tackle. So it's almost kind of gaining the confidence through those three. So, what are kind of your thoughts on how you've developed, as cinematographer, director, how DBS has developed with the model between Girl in Cabin 13 to the Forest of Death? Because, honestly, after the Forest of Death, going into the Forest and Roger Files, we're like, this is cakewalk.
Yeah, it definitely was very difficult. Murder House was a pretty hard movie to edit, but that was just because we had to do a lot of pickups. We kept having issues with the pickups. And it was a very technical movie. Like, there's just a lot of moving pieces, a lot of scenes that required a lot of cuts. It was just a very difficult movie to edit. Where Girl in Cabin 13, you only have 2 characters. You can use basic coverage, which is wide, close up. And it's fairly easy to edit. We knocked that one out pretty quick. Then we came to Shapeshifter, which was just, from start to finish, this movie was a beast. And, I think it's a testament to the crew, to the cast, to everyone who worked on this project that we were able to get it done. I think if you give this movie to any other indie studio or anyone trying to shoot this thing for under $100,000, I really think that they would struggle to finish it. It was just an absolute beast. From writing this thing, I never felt really comfortable with it, to shooting this thing, which just, it was very, very complicated, very difficult. There were very long days. And then editing this thing was also extremely difficult, just because of how technical this one was. Again, there was a ton of coverage to choose from. And we had everything we needed, but it was just a very difficult movie to edit, because we were just, so I'm a one-man editing team, and you have an absolute insane amount of footage to go through. It was just it was a process. That being said, the final product is very good. I'm very happy. It's better than I, anticipated. When we made the movie, the whole goal, this is a 1.0 concept, was just to test the idea, get a completed uploaded movie, and just try and learn, get better with cinematography, get better with sound, get better with actors. And if people like it, we could easily do a Shapeshifter 2.0. If people didn't like it, well, I didn't break the bank. We made it for almost nothing basically in movie terms. And, we can put it out there and see what happens. And it turned out to be a great movie. It got the style, the vibe, everything that we were trying to go for with the homage to 70s and 80s horror. I think there's a couple scares in there. There's some funny moments in there. And I think the main thing is it just needs a little bit more. I think that's going to be the number one feedback, was this is a pretty basic movie where you go in one direction. It's a good hour and 20 minutes of just, you can kind of watch it and turn your brain off. But the reviews that are coming in, which make me very, very happy when people say, hey, I wish there was more. I wish there was more to this movie, because I can easily give you more. And that's what we do with the 2.0 versions of these movies. I could easily make another Shapeshifter movie. I can make it more mystery. I can make it more gory. I can make it more scary. Not a problem. But the whole goal was to finish this one, see if people liked it, and get it uploaded.
Exactly that. So with this episode, I think we'll just go ahead and hop into each one of those sections, as you were kind of mentioning, with like making it. And then in the next episode, we'll go ahead and talk more detail of like what we expect reception wise and just kind of the overall product. So first thing for writing, I remember this one, we've kind of gotten into a groove when it comes to like the ideas and whatnot, where it's like, for the most part, yep, this works. We've done this before. This works. That works. And again, if we revisit a concept, it allows it to be a lot of straightforward items, but this is why you make movies. You understand what types of concepts and scenes work. For the Shapeshifter, this was one where I remember, we had a good amount of back and forth. There was a few times I was walking back and forth. I was like, no, we need torches, or we need this, or we need that. And I think the issue with it is because the essence of the movie itself, a Shapeshifter, like the Thing, just so many opportunities. And it's exactly what you were talking about, where there's, a lot more could be there. But I think, again, it was just a big concept from the beginning. And I think the issue with writing a big concept like this is you can go in so many different directions. And we had, a cast of 4 people, which we learned from the Murder House is a great way to increase the pacing, because you can cut back and forth, which was a big thing that we learned. So we knew we wanted to have 4 characters, but it was almost something where, I felt like in the writing process for this one, we almost had to just like pick a lane and say, okay, we have to do this because we have to keep the scale in there. And I could see just writing this idea for any other film or indie filmmaker, you get the textbook story of too much plot going on. No one has no clue what's happened, and everyone's just confused.
Yeah, it definitely is a big time movie. And I think it definitely lends itself to a budget that's over $1 million with multiple locations, probably a bigger cast and crew, because you really want to get that mystery element. Who is the Shapeshifter? Is this the Shapeshifter? Who is the person? Are they real, or are they the creature? And that's really what you want. That is the juice, the meat of the story, because then you can kind of make it like it's just more intense like that. But with what we're trying to do, obviously we had essentially a cabin and we had the woods, and that was it. And we had 4 cast members. So we had to make a movie with just those resources. And we talk about this all the time about how to scale your production down and use what you have. And those were the assets that we had that, we allocated with our budget level. So I do think the tricky thing with this one was, how do we take all that stuff and fit it into this story while still keeping it engaged? And I think that was the biggest thing that we struggled with. I felt like the script wrote itself pretty quickly. We had a very good, solid, rough script very, very quickly in this process. I just remember spending 6 weeks trying to figure out, there's like one part in the middle of the movie where they run down and they try and find that Roger's in the woods, and they can't find him, and they come back up, and then they see Roger and they run back down into the woods again. And I was like, man, this is a lot of running down the steps. We're doing the same thing twice right in the middle of the movie. And it turns out that wasn't a problem at all. And I think it's just an experience level of learning how to make movies. I was so nervous that this is going to be repetitive, it's going to be boring, and it turned out to be absolutely fine. And then after that, the movie just kind of kicks it into another gear as far as like action. There's no problems with pacing. If anything, the pacing was with the Roger fire pit scene and the scene before that, where you're kind of getting a first glimpse at the creature cam. I think that would be the issue with that one, because that scare doesn't hit. And you've heard us talk about scares before. If your beats are missing, especially in indie horror movies, you're going to be in trouble, because We had a little beat there. It didn't hit as solid as I wanted it to. And then we go into about an 8-minute dialogue scene before something else happens. But I think the tension's there enough. I think it gets it through. And I thought that Ben did a very good job delivering his monologue. Man, if Ben came in there and just gave something that was very flat, this movie would have been dead on arrival. But he did a great job. Everything was very intense with his story, is engaging. It kept everyone's attention. And then right after that, we have more suspense and tension and scares moving forward. So really after that fire pit scene, everything kind of picks up. But it's just why you got to make movies, because you start to see these things, come out when you write the script and you're like, this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem. And then you shoot it and it's not a problem. And the problems arise in other areas. Well, next time I write a script, I'm going to focus more on the problem areas and not worry about, the stuff that's in my head that I think is going to be boring. But that just comes from experience of making a lot of movies, which is why we say make a lot of movies.
Exactly that. The more movies you make, the better you're gonna get. It's that straightforward. So, I will say, it really was something I do want to nod my head when you were like, oh man, this middle part. And I remember reading that. I'm like, it's fine. They can just go out there, hear noises. It'll be okay. So I did call that one. I will give myself a little nod to that. But it is something where, again, based on all the experience we have, we had a really good stack of scares in there. Even if it was the creature cam didn't fall too flat, we had Roger behind the fridge, which is a classic one to even spice that up. So we gave ourselves a lot of fail safes, I feel like, with this one as well, too. Now let's hop into the production side of things. So I think this was the biggest risk. I mean, my goodness, this was a big movie. This is a huge amount of stuff to do. Great. You're doing the one fun thing you always do, which is filming in the woods, which is terrible. We have torches. We have blood. We have scares. We have all of this stuff. We have Roger, which is a new guy coming on who has to carry it. Like you said, thankfully, Ben stepped it up and knocked it out of the park. But this was just a big, big schedule. And I remember the concerns I had from the very beginning, as I was calling you Captain Coverage from The Haunting of the Murder House, we had a lot of footage of stuff. And I just remember looking at the shot list. I'm like, dude, trust your instincts. You only need 2 or 3 and you're good. After going through the Murder House editing, there's just a lot of takes that I was like, I already have a usable take, more of them. Now, again, the worst thing you can ever do is not have a take. But when you're on an indie film budget level, you got to keep it straightforward. And I think the biggest issue with production that I was worried about is this was a rented location out in the, out in the areas there that we were filming at. And if we had to do a reshoot, that would completely bust the budget. And there's a lot of possibility for things to go wrong. So while I was doing the live editing, I was making sure that we had everything that we possibly could. So you have a big concept, you have a time crunch, you have all of this stuff in production, and you're out in the middle of nowhere, and there's basically no Wi-Fi. So how are your feelings on that production? And I will say, I was scared that first day. I was like, this is not looking good.
Yeah, the first day was rough. I do have a day job that needed to be attended to, and there was no Wi-Fi working. We didn't get a lot of stuff done the first night. It took a long time to get out to that location. It took a long time to find a grocery store that was near that location and get everyone fed and settled in. I think we only did the cabinet stuff and maybe some stuff outside, on the porch for a little bit. It wasn't a lot of stuff. And I remember going to bed on the couch and just being like, oh man, we are behind. This is not really ideal. I might have to try and go drive down the street to find Wi-Fi and work and then come all the way back. So I was sweating that first night. But after that, we kind of fell into a groove. And then the only time that I was really nervous, again, was towards the end of it, when we had a special effects shot where we kind of cut one scene with another scene. And we were just struggling to figure out how to do that. The brain fog was, maximum overload at that point. I wasn't thinking clearly, it's difficult, but, you never really show the actors that stuff. We kind of put them inside. I shut the door, and then me and Kel kind of figured out how to do this thing outside, and we got a very good way to do it. We knocked it out. And after that, because we started with the hard stuff first on this movie, the last couple of days were very easy. And I think 100% if we would have started with all the easy stuff and we had to end with that climax or end with the torch scene at the end, this movie wouldn't have been completed. And we learned that stuff from the first 8 movies where we constantly did the climax at the end of the movies. The climax always suffered and we always struggled. And this one I knew, and I always remember the last day, we had a lot of stuff to do in the last day, but it is very easy stuff. And worst case scenario, when you have easy stuff, is you can run and gun. I could put the shoulder rig on and just kind of crank out a whole bunch of stuff, because it doesn't matter how cinematic some of this stuff is. It's basically get this person running from this place, or get some close-ups of these cards, or get, some tracking shots. You're not going to win an Oscar with the small stuff. So I think that always kind of gave me confidence in there. That being said, this thing was an absolute beast. I would never even try anything close to this again, because it was just a crazy experience. But I did learn how to, kind of trust my instincts as far as cinematography. Almost all the takes and footage that we had was absolutely usable. But that was kind of PTSD from the first 8 movies, where through all 8 of those movies, when we sat down to edit them, we never had enough. We were always short on footage. We always had issues with audio. There was just a ton of stuff where we had to either go back and scrap and, get, the actors back and blow the budget, like Kellen said, or we were just doing pickup shots. We were getting people's feet, people's hands, because we didn't have enough in the editing table. And I was like, worst case scenario, I never want to do that again. That being said, I got a lot of confidence from Shapeshifter. I'm more confident in my ability. I think that showed in Into the Forest, because we had less footage, but that was a much smoother shoot. And we have just as much, we have just enough for me to get that movie across the goal line.
Exactly that. It is a balancing act there. And I would say if you want to err in one way, it is having more footage than less. But if you run out of time, well, then you're going to not have scenes that you need. So that was a crunch. That was another textbook DBS shoot where it is 7 a.m. The sun is coming up, and it is just a wild ride. So, that was one that I was very, very impressed that we did get it completed. So let's move on to the editing side of things. Now, the big role that I was playing for these last 3, and sort of a little bit in Into the Forest, not at all for Roger Files, just because I feel like we're, getting more and more confident with our locations or just the execution of it. And plus Roger File was a much easier reshoot if anything ever went wrong. But that's the live editing. So basically, as Brendan's filming, I'm sitting there putting together a timeline. It was super critical in this one because, again, there's a lot of risk. If you miss one little thing, if you miss one connector, you are pretty much screwed. So I was basically busy editing, getting at least a workable timeline together. Now, I will say this, from the very beginning, I was like, this is a better movie. And I say it all the time because I've seen them when they're just the raw and they move into like the first edit that I'm putting together, that first rough timeline. And, I knew it for Murder House. I knew it for Girl in Cabin 13. And I knew it right away for Forest of Death. It just looks amazing. It was much better paced. There were so many things that were hitting well. And I was just like, this is easily the best movie that we're making by far. It was really coming together very well. And I think the big thing to me was it felt like we had the look from the Girl in Cabin 13, which, just aesthetically was pleasing because of the outdoor, the woods are spooky. They look great. It's creepy out there. The Murder House, I think, suffered from the cinematography, not in the sense of anything that you were doing, but just in the sense that we kept them in a dark house that wasn't really interesting. It wasn't like a big manor or something like that that was unique there. So, the first peeks at it, I was like, this is a good movie. This is the best movie we've ever made. And I will say this, I've gotten the same feeling for Into the Forest, and I'm starting to get that feeling for the Roger File. So, Ben, if you're hearing this, we're picking up steam. It's getting much better. It looks fantastic. But the big thing for me was when editing this one, like you said, there was a lot of stuff and angles to have. And I was kind of just, making sure the wides work and whatnot. But I was coming to you a lot and I was like, dude, we have a ton. Like I was, even just from the beginning, I wanted to make sure we had all the coverage. But I was just saying, from the beginning, your cinematography, you were able to hone in on just the bare bones that we had. So worst comes to worst, the only thing that we're missing is a few details. And then we even had a little bit of a pickup list, which was that last day, of just minor tweaks to the scenes because they didn't flow too well or whatnot. But, just from my element in the first part of the editing, I knew we had kind of, I think my question was never if this was going to be a good or bad movie. It was just, will we be able to film this movie?
Yeah, I definitely think that the two things I'm most proud of for this project is the upgrade in cinematography. I did think Murder House was decent, but I was really trying to go for like natural lighting and realistic lighting, and I just don't think that works. I think it works in a found footage movie, but when you're trying to make a cinematic movie and you're not properly lighting people, it's not going to work out too well, even though there is no reason for that person to have a light on their face if there's no power in the house and it's completely dark. You still have to do it. And I think that this was kind of the split test. With Murder House is very natural lighting. We try to make it realistic. And with this movie, I was like, screw it. You know, these people are in the woods. We're going to put a giant light out there. The moon is just very bright, and nobody has said anything. If anything, people have said this is the best cinematic movie that we've made. The lighting is absolutely phenomenal. And so there you go. And I think you see it a lot in the movies where someone's running through the woods and they are perfectly lit. And it's just like, that's not realistic, but that is movie making and movie magic. Nobody is ever going to leave you a 1 star for that. And if they do leave you a 1 star, I will take that 1 star, because in my mind, this movie looks a lot better. The second thing is pacing. And I really think that pacing is so critical for indie filmmakers. And it's always my biggest concern with these movies is, when you start watching it, do you watch it all the way through and do you get bored? And I really think that with how aggressive this movie is, as far as how much lore we are creating, how much character development we are creating, it has the opportunity to be very slow and boring. If you look at a lot of shapeshifter movies, if you look at a lot of movies from the 70s and 80s, they're very slow burn movies. And that style is kind of gone, especially with AVOD. You are getting your money through advertising. And so for me to make a movie that, you know, is a homage to those kind of other movies, but still is fast paced, was, I think, the biggest challenge of this movie. And yes, I understand there's montages, and I'm probably going to eat a lot of 1 stars for how many montages I put in there. And I've learned my lesson. That being said, the movie moves very, very quickly and it keeps your attention all the way through.
Yeah, it moves fast, and I'm excited to see the reception for it. So I think the last thing I kind of want to talk about in the editing was something that, one of the reasons we moved to found footage is because you almost give yourself, when you have too many options, especially cinematic, and you have angles and things like that, you can just give yourself analysis paralysis. You can just swirl on what type of scene that you want, what type of movies there. And I think it was something that kind of came up, after the rough draft was kind of handed off and we were like finding out the details. Really, it was like, hey man, we just got to push this one and make it through. And this, I think, is something that every indie filmmaker is going to struggle with, because when you watch something so many times, it doesn't even look like it's normal anymore. And you're just sitting there, is this one better? Does this look better? Is that better? And because of the nature of just this idea and the concept and how big it is, I think it opened it up a lot for that, in the sense of you could actually do a lot with just how the scenes were adjusted, how they were kind of whittled down. I think at one point, we had a conversation where just like, we just got to just be done with it. And I think, again, I just want to circle back to this one, because at least one thing that I've noticed is you end up watching a movie so many times during the editing process. Like A Girl in Cabin 13 was like one of the best examples. I think I watched that thing like 50 times, because again, it was our first one after The Hateful Eight. So like we were really working in there. And I just got so sick of that movie. I really did. Each of the scenes, everything was like dragging. You're like, oh gosh. Now I watch Girl in Cabin 13. Amazing. Love it. It's fantastic. So you almost want to try and find a way to move on. And actually, one of the reasons that we hopped into found footage, not only because there is a good group out there and there is a good model for it, but it does allow you to kind of push that, over the edge. You want to just kind of talk about how you can get stuck in that editing process a little bit. Because I would say we're still incredibly fast for the industry standard and everything like that. But it's just something with a concept like this, there's so many different ways you can take each scene.
Well, I definitely think there is a parallel between writing and editing. With writing, you can sit there and you can write for 3 years, and you could try and, fine tune the entire script and make it absolutely perfect. And there's a million different variations and a million different things you can do to try and make the best script, the script that's in your mind, or you can give it the time it deserves and send it out. And I think with Shapeshifter, that was my issue, is that I was trying to consistently, make this thing better and better and better and better. And at some point you just got to say, hey, look, give it the best shot you possibly can and just upload it and move on to the next project. I can sit there and cut a scene together a million different ways, and some of them are going to be worse. Some of them might be slightly better, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the same movie. I think the goal is to get the pacing correct. And then once you do that, just try and find the best takes and the best shots and, swap them out to get that movie completed. But it definitely took longer than I anticipated. It was a much more grueling movie, but I do think I could have probably shaved off 2 months. I really think that I spent 2 months there trying to really, really give it like a nice polish. And in the end, I don't think it was worth it. I think that for our process moving forward in the editing room, when I'm solely focused on one movie, it's 90 days. And I think we hit that with Into the Forest. I really started after uploading Shapeshifter to the distribution company in December. I really started to really work on that one January 1st. And now we're sitting here. We have one more week left in March. That's 90 days. And this thing's done once I just put in the last ADR stuff. So I think that's the timeline for us. Very aggressive. Most Hollywood movies take a year to complete. Most indie movies take 2 years to complete. But I think moving forward, we're really going to try and do 90 days in editing. Now, we always are juggling projects. Like we have the Roger project, in editing purgatory right now. I'm going to have to be working on Into the Forest to upload it through quality control. And we're shooting Bigfoot next month. So it's not like this is like our only thing. But that being said, when I sit down, I'm like, all right, this project, the Roger project is next on there. I'm fully devoted to editing this thing. 90 days is really where I think you want to do it. If you're spending more time on that, I just think you're going to have diminishing returns.
Man, that sounds so nice to have a single project just to kind of focus in on. But that being said, that's not the DBS model. We keep things cooking here. So that's going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. Next episode, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the launch, how we're feeling about it, all of that fun stuff when it comes to releasing a movie. But be sure to take a look at our Discord channel online because we make movies for our fans, with our fans. We are going to have those Bigfoot auditions coming very soon, my friends. So now's the time to go ahead, download that app, click the links in our bio, join us. But until then, have a good one.